The fire court did not ask Elowen Vale to sing. It ordered her throat to prove it was ruined. She stood barefoot on the black glass floor, surrounded by 12 bronze braziers taller than men, each burning with dragonfire that bowed only to royal blood. Heat pressed against her skin until sweat gathered beneath the collar of her faded servant dress. Her hands remained folded in front of her, red from ash water and kitchen lye. She kept them still because trembling would become another kind of performance, and the court had already been promised enough of her humiliation. Lady Vespera Thorn stood beside the nearest brazier, wrapped in crimson silk, her golden hair pinned with tiny dragon bone combs. Every noble in the fire hall knew her voice could bend flame into ribbons. She had sung victories into war banners, lullabies into dragon eggs, and false grief into funeral smoke. Tonight, she smiled at Elowen as if presenting a cracked cup for inspection. "Sing," Vespera said. Elowen opened her mouth. Nothing came. Not a note. Not a whisper. Not even the broken rasp she sometimes managed when calling for water in the servant corridors. The old scar inside her throat tightened like a hand closing around invisible thread. A few nobles smiled. Dragon King Caeryn Veyr sat on the obsidian throne at the end of the hall, one arm resting against a carved dragon head, black hair falling loose around a face too still to read. His eyes were pale gold, dangerous in the way banked embers were dangerous. No one mistook stillness for softness around him. Men had been executed by a lift of his hand. Armies had knelt because his dragon shadow crossed a battlefield before his soldiers arrived. But tonight he had done nothing when Vespera dragged Elowen from the kitchens. He had only said, "Let her sing." That sentence had cut deeper than laughter. Elowen looked at him now, and hatred would have been easier if he had looked amused. He did not. His gaze stayed on the braziers, not on her mouth. As if he were waiting for the fire to betray someone before she did, Vespera turned to the court. "You see? The ash-maid's voice is as empty as her blood." Elowen lowered her eyes. That was the wound they loved most. Not that she was mute. Not exactly. A mute girl might be pitied if she were noble, protected if she were useful, hidden if she belonged to someone important. Elowen had been made into a court joke because her silence had once been music. As a child in the lower halls, she had hummed to stove coals, and they had brightened. She had sung to boiling water, and it had calmed. Then one winter night, after the old queen died, her voice vanished in a fever of smoke. By morning, every servant was told she had ruined it herself by imitating noble flame song above her station, so they kept her in ash. They made her carry coal to singers who mocked her. They made her polish bronze braziers that would never answer her again. "Louder," Vespera said softly. "Surely a maid who dirties royal fire with her hands can give us one sound." Elowen lifted her chin. Her throat burned. Her lungs trembled. She could have tried harder. She could have forced the scar open until blood came into her mouth. The court wanted that. A failed note. A torn sound. Proof that her body knew its place. Instead, she closed her mouth. Vespera's smile sharpened. Defiance from a kitchen ghost. A bronze rod flashed in her hand. She struck the nearest brazier. Dragonfire leapt. Elowen did not step back, though heat washed over her face. The flame rose higher than the pillars, twisting into a bright gold column. Vespera inhaled, preparing to demonstrate what real flame song could do. Then the fire sang first. The sound was low, soft, wrong. It began as a hum inside the bronze, a single note trembling beneath the roar of dragonfire. The other braziers answered one by one, until 12 flames surrounded Elowen with the same melody. The court's amusement died without a word. Elowen knew the song. She did not know how. It was not one of Vespera's victory airs. Not a court hymn. Not a temple chant. It was older, gentler, threaded with grief and warmth. The kind of song a mother would sing with one hand on a cradle and the other shielding a candle from wind. Caeryn rose from the throne. The sound of his boots on black glass cut through the lullaby, but did not stop it. His face had changed. The stillness remained, yet something under it had cracked open. Vespera went pale. Elowen saw it. Good. Fear suited her better than silk. Caeryn descended the throne steps slowly. "Who taught you that song?" Elowen touched her throat. Nothing. The flames answered for her. They rose higher. bending toward the king. In the center brazier, gold fire turned wah! Caeryn stopped as if struck. His voice lowered. Mother. The word moved through the hall like a forbidden door opening. Elowen's breath caught. The dead queen's lullaby. The fire was singing the dead queen's lullaby for her. Vesper recovered before the court did. She struck the brazier again, harder. Trick flame. The queen's hand in the fire shattered into sparks. Elowen flinched. The flame flinched with her. Pain cut across her throat. Sharp and sudden. Though nothing touched her skin. A thin line of heat bloomed beneath her collarbone, hidden by the servant dress. Not burning from outside. Awakening from within. Caeryn saw her reaction. This time, he looked at her mouth, then at her chest, then at the flames. You should not have tried to sing through your throat, he said. The words were too quiet for comfort. Elowen stared at him. Vespera heard enough to understand danger. Her eyes narrowed, and she lifted her bronze rod toward the guards. The maid has infected royal fire. Bind her before the lullaby spreads. Silver fire chains dropped from the pillars. Elowen stepped back. But the circle had already closed. The first chain wrapped around her wrist. Heat exploded through her arm. She bit down on the pain, but the flames screamed in her place. Caeryn moved, not fast enough to hide guilt, fast enough to show choice. He caught the second chain in his bare hand before it reached her throat. Dragonfire should have obeyed him. It did not. The chain burned across his palm, and black smoke rose from his skin. He did not let go. His jaw tightened, but his knees did not bend. Vespera smiled at that. How touching. The king protects a silent maid from a trial he ordered. Elowen looked at him. The sentence landed exactly where Vespera wanted it to. Caeryn did not deny it. I ordered the song, he said. Elowen's chest went cold. Of course he had. Vespera's smile widened. Caeryn's burned hand tightened around the chain. I did not order her throat to be forced open. That is a small mercy to offer after dragging her before listeners, Vespera said. Listeners. Elowen did not know the word, but the flames did. Every brazier recoiled as if the hall itself had grown ears. The word changed the fire. Every brazier bent inward. Elowen felt something inside the flames turn its attention toward the walls, the pillars, the bronze mouths carved into the ceiling. Listening mouths. Hidden ones. Caeryn's face hardened. Vespera had said too much. Elowen forced herself to lift her bound wrist. The flames leaned toward her, trembling. She could not speak, so she chose with the only voice she had left. She pointed to the ceiling. The 12 braziers sang one sharp note together. Bronze dragon mouths opened above the court, and from each one fell a curl of black smoke shaped like an ear. Caeryn looked up. Vespera's face emptied. Then the flames sang in the dead queen's voice. They were listening for the girl's real song, and every bronze ear above the court turned toward Elowen's scarred throat. The hidden ears in the ceiling heard the queen's voice and reached for Elowen's throat instead. Black smoke uncurled from the bronze dragon mouths above the fire court, thin as thread, sharp as hooks. The strands did not drift. They aimed. One brushed Elowen's cheek, cold despite the heat of the braziers, and the scar inside her throat clenched so hard her knees nearly folded. The flames screamed for her again. Caeryn lifted his burned hand toward the braziers. By royal blood, stand down. The fire did not obey. Every flame bent away from his command, and toward the song still trembling around Elowen. The queen's lullaby had changed the rank of the room. King fire was law, but queen song was older, deeper. It moved through the bronze as if the court itself had been built around a grief no one had buried properly. Caeryn's face went still. Vespera saw it and smiled. How unfortunate. The fire remembers a dead woman better than it obeys a living king. Elowen tried to step back, but the silver fire chains held her wrists. Another smoke thread lowered from the ceiling and touched the hollow of her throat. Pain flashed white. Not sound. The absence of sound. Something inside her scar pulled tight, as if hidden hands had found a buried knot and begun to draw it out. Caeryn moved toward her. Elowen shook her head. The motion was small, but the flames caught it. The nearest brazier flared between them, blocking his path. He stopped, jaw clenched, anger burning behind his pale gold eyes. Good. Let him learn that protection could become another kind of theft if he moved before she chose. Vespera stepped closer, bronze rod held loosely in her hand. Do you understand now, ash-maid? Your throat was not ruined because it was worthless. Elowen stared at her. Vespera's smile turned almost tender. It was ruined because it was unfinished. A broken throat dies, Vespera murmured. An unfinished one waits. The words struck harder than the chains. Unfinished. Not broken. Not empty. Unfinished. The smoke threads tugged again. Elowen tasted ash and remembered being small, fevered, curled beneath a kitchen table while the palace bells rang for the queen's death. She remembered a warm hand over her mouth. Not to silence a scream, but to keep something from escaping. The memory vanished before she could hold it. Vespera lifted her rod toward the bronze ears. Pull carefully. If the song tears, the command dies with her. Caeryn's head turned sharply. Command? Vespera's eyes flicked to him. Too late. Elowen saw the mistake. She could not speak, but she could still act. The nearest brazier stood to her left, its flame bending toward her like a frightened animal. She dragged her chained wrist through the heat and slammed her palm over the bronze rim. Skin burned. The flame vanished under her hand. The lullaby broke for one beat. Every smoke thread recoiled. Elowen nearly collapsed from the pain, but she used that one broken beat. She pointed with her burned hand, not at Vespera's face, but at the bronze rod. The flames understood. 12 braziers bent their light toward the rod in Vespera's hand. The bronze darkened, and beneath its polished surface, tiny ear-shaped marks appeared one by one, carved along the handle like listening wounds. Caeryn's voice dropped. That rod carries the listeners. Vespera's expression hardened. It controls them. The queen's fire answered. The center brazier opened with white gold flame, and a memory rose inside it. A younger Vespera stood in a sealed chamber beneath the fire court, her golden hair loose, her hands stained with soot. Around her, 12 bronze braziers burned low. Between them stood a child Elowen, pale with fever, throat glowing with a thin line of living fire. The child tried to hum. The sound never reached the air. Bronze ears opened in the walls and drank it first. Elowen's breath stopped. The memory showed Vespera lifting the same rod. Not alone. Shadowed figures stood behind the bronze screens, wearing court rings and listener masks, shaped like dragon skulls. They whispered as the child's song was divided. One note into the first brazier, one breath into the second, one trembling lullaby, curve into the third. By the 12th, the child had no voice left, but she was still alive. Vespera watched the memory with a face carved from control. We saved the realm. Caeryn's hand curled into a fist. Smoke rose from the chain still burning across his palm. You cut a child's voice into pieces. No. Vespera's eyes flashed. We divided what the queen hid in her. There's a difference. Elowen looked at Caeryn. He knew that look. He deserved it. His face tightened, but he did not hide. I suspected my mother's last song had been trapped in the court fires, he said. I suspected Vespera's victories were sung with stolen notes. Elowen's burned hand trembled. Caeryn's voice roughened. I did not know the notes were yours. That was not enough. He knew it before she moved. Elowen lifted her chained wrists and pointed to the black glass floor beneath her feet. The flames dimmed. Caeryn understood. He looked down, then back at her. You want the court to see what I signed. She held his gaze. Yes. His jaw flexed. Then he turned his burned hand palm up, showing the mark the chain had carved through royal skin. Show my order. The black glass floor answered. Golden script rose beneath his boots. By command of Dragon King Caeryn Veyr. Present the ash-maid before the fire court. Let her song be tested under 12 braziers. Elowen read every word. So did the flames. The fire did not forgive him. Neither did she. Caeryn lowered his head once. Not to the court. To her. I made your pain the door because I feared opening mine. Vespera laughed softly. How noble. But fear was correct. She struck the rod against the floor. The 12 braziers flared open, each releasing one stolen piece of Elowen's divided voice. The notes circled her like birds made of fire, beautiful and starving. Her scar burned as if they wanted to return all at once. Elowen knew they would kill her if they did. Vespera knew it too. "Sing now," she whispered. "Take it back and choke on it." Elowen covered her throat with both chained hands. "No." The flames stopped. Vespera's smile faltered. Elowen pointed to the braziers one by one, then slowly closed her fist. "Not return. Hold." The queen's lullaby shifted into something sharper, unfinished, waiting behind the melody like a blade behind silk. The bronze ears above the court turned inward, terrified at last. Then the 12 flames sang together in the dead queen's voice. The song they wanted was not the girl's voice. Elowen felt the truth like a blade laid gently inside her scar. The floor beneath the braziers split with a deep dragon growl. It was the command that could wake every dragon buried beneath the fire court. The floor opened beneath the 12 braziers, and the first dragon below was chained by its own song. Not iron, bronze. Listener hooks curved through the great beast's throat, each one glowing with a stolen note. Its body lay half-buried beneath black glass and old ash, scales dark red beneath layers of furnace dust. Wings folded so tightly against its ribs they looked carved from ruin. It did not roar when the fire court split open above it. It hummed. One broken note. Elowen felt the sound inside her scar. Her knees weakened. The silver fire chains around her wrists pulled tight, but she did not fall. The note was small, trembling, almost childish, impossible for something so vast. It brushed against the hollow place where her voice should have been and made her remember a kitchen hearth, a cracked wooden stool, and her own child self humming to a coal that had glowed brighter because it wanted to listen. The memory hurt more than the burn. Vespera lifted her bronze rod at once. "Seal the floor." The 12 braziers flared, but they did not close with me. Their flame bent downward, toward the buried dragon, like guilty witnesses avoiding a queen's eye. Caeryn stepped to the edge of the opening. Smoke still rose from his burned palm. His face had gone pale beneath its controlled stillness. "That is Velrath," he said. The name moved through the fire like a wound remembered. Elowen looked at him. Caeryn's jaw tightened. "My mother's war dragon." Below the glass, the dragon opened one gold eye. The bronze hooks through its throat brightened. Vespera smiled before anyone else could understand. "Yes, the queen's war dragon, buried because it heard her final command and refused to let the court use it." Caeryn turned on her. "You told me Velrath died with her. I told the kingdom what kept it calm." The buried dragon hummed again. Another note answered from a second brazier, then another from a third. Beneath the fire court, shapes shifted in the ash. A horn half covered in soot, a folded wing, the small curved spine of something that had never grown old enough for battle. Not monsters waiting to burn the world. Dragons. Royal dragons. War dragons. Hatchlings. Creatures that had once listened to the queen and been punished for answering the wrong song. Elowen's throat burned. The notes wanted to rise. Vespera pointed her rod toward her. "If the ash-maid completes the command, every buried dragon wakes. The fire court burns. The city burns. Your Majesty's bloodline ends beneath its own throne." There it was. A truth sharpened into a cage. Caeryn looked at Elowen. Fear crossed his face, not for himself, for what might happen if he moved wrong. Elowen covered her throat with both chained hands. "No." The flames stilled. Vespera's eyes narrowed. She cannot hold them forever. An unfinished song hungers for an ending. Elowen lowered one burned hand and pointed to the first brazier only. "One. Not all." The fire bent toward her. Vespera's face hardened. "You have no right to choose which dragon answers." Elowen looked at the buried beast. Velrath's gold eye stayed fixed on her, old and exhausted and patient beyond cruelty. She pressed her palm flat to the black glass floor and drew a single line through the ash with 2 fingers. "Show," the queen's flame answered. White gold fire rose from the first brazier and poured downward into the split floor. Not to wake the dragon, to remember it. Inside the fire, a vision formed. Queen Maelire of Veyr stood in the same fire court years ago, one hand pressed to her swollen belly, the other wrapped around Velrath's great snout. Around her, bronze ears hung from the ceiling, already listening. Vespera stood younger and silent beside the braziers, holding the rod like a student waiting for permission to become a knife. The queen was bleeding from the mouth. Yet when she opened it, no song came out, only a breath. Velrath lowered its head to hear. Queen Melira touched the dragon's throat and whispered, "Do not wake them for me." The memory shook. Vespera stiffened. Caeryn took one step forward. "Mother." The queen's face turned toward the child hidden behind a pillar. Young Caeryn, no older than 10, watching with wide, pale gold eyes. "Choose who may answer," the queen whispered. "Not crown, not court, not fear. Choose." The command broke before it could finish. Bronze ears opened. They drank the last syllable from her mouth. Velrath lunged to protect her, but listener hooks shot from the braziers and caught its throat. One hook for each stolen note. The dragon fell without roaring. The queen's unfinished command scattered into the 12 fires. Then the vision shifted to child Elowen, fevered beneath the kitchens, her throat glowing as the broken command was hidden inside. The only living silence the listeners would overlook. Not a singer, a listener, a witness made of ash and restraint. The vision vanished. Elowen's breath shook. Vespera's smile returned, but it was thinner now. How beautiful. The queen trusted a servant child because she could not trust her own son. Caeryn's face changed. That struck deep. Vespera knew it would. Elowen turned sharply and shook her head. "No." Caeryn looked at her. She pointed to the memory fading in the flame, then to him, then slowly opened her burned hand. Not blame. Ghost. He understood enough to flinch. "You want my blood in the fire," he said. Elowen nodded once. Vespera's eyes flashed. "Royal blood commands dragonfire. If he gives it now, he claims the buried dragons through the queen's song." Elowen slammed her chained hand against the glass. The first brazier flared in denial. Caeryn understood before Vespera could twist it again. "Not command," he said, his voice lowered, roughened by something older than pride. "Surrender." The braziers turned toward him. He took the small blade from his belt and cut across the palm already burned by the chain. Blood welled dark red, then gold at the edges. He stepped to the first brazier and held his hand over the flame. Vespera moved. "Your Majesty." Caeryn did not look at her. "The buried dragons do not answer King Fire." He let the blood fall. "They answer choice." The first drop struck the flame. The fire court shook. Not from waking. From refusal. The bronze hooks in Velrath's throat cracked one by one, but did not break fully. The dragon lifted its chained head beneath the glass, and the note in its throat rose toward Elowen. She stepped back on instinct. The note followed. Not to enter her, to return itself. Elowen pressed one hand to her scar and shook her head. "Not through me. Not yet." Velrath's gold eye softened. Then the dragon beneath the first brazier opened its mouth. She did not lose her voice, it sang. Elowen felt the note touch the scar inside her throat like a child pressing its hand against a locked window. The note was small, bright, and unbearably familiar. Elowen's childhood voice. "We have been keeping it alive." The first piece of Elowen's voice touched her scar, and every bronze ear in the ceiling screamed. The sound did not come from her throat. It came from above her, from the hidden mouths carved into the fire court's rafters. From the bronze dragon faces that had listened for years without being seen. Their screams were thin and metallic, like knives dragged over temple bells. Black smoke poured from them in twisting streams, each one reaching down for the note Velrath had given back. Elowen clamped both hands over her throat. "No, not there." The note trembled against the scar inside her. Small and bright, almost alive. If she let it enter her throat, she knew it would open something. Maybe a sound. Maybe a wound. Maybe the path for all 11 stolen notes to rush after it and tear her apart from the inside. So she did not swallow it. She held out one burned hand. The note moved. A bead of white gold fire slid from her throat into her palm and curled there like a sleeping ember. The bronze ears shrieked louder. Vespera's face sharpened. "Clever little ash thing." Elowen looked at her. Vespera lifted the bronze rod. The earmarks carved along its handle opened one by one. Tiny mouths rimmed in black fire. But a voice does not belong in the hand. It belongs in the throat. If the dragon gives her one note, The other 11 will follow, and her throat will become their battlefield. The remaining 11 braziers flared. Beneath the cracked glass floor, buried shapes shifted. Velrath's head remained lifted. Listener hooks still curved through its throat, each bronze barb glowing with a stolen note. Around it, other dragons stirred under ash and black glass. A war dragon with one broken horn. A pale hatchling curled around its own tail. A wingless old fire drake whose throat was wrapped in bronze wire. None rose. None attacked. They waited. That made them harder to look at. Elowen stared at the ember note in her palm. It pulsed with her childhood humming, with stove warmth, with the small girl she had been before silence became a room she could not leave. Vespera struck the rod against the floor. The 11 remaining hooks in Velrath's throat lit at once. The dragon convulsed beneath the glass. Elowen felt the pull through the note in her hand. Her scar burned open with hunger, not her own. 11 pieces of voice tried to follow the first, racing toward her like sparks pulled into dry straw. Caeryn moved toward Vespera. Elowen slammed her palm against the nearest brazier. The single note entered the flame. The brazier cracked from rim to base. Caeryn stopped. The note did not become a song. It became a mark. White gold script burned across the bronze in a shape Elowen did not know. But Velrath did. The buried dragon went still, breathing hard through the hooks. Caeryn read the mark with a face that slowly lost color. "A name sign," he said. Vespera's eyes flashed. "No." Elowen turned to him. Caeryn looked from the cracked brazier to Velrath below. The queen did not command all dragons to wake. She gave each one the right to answer by name. Elowen pressed her burned fingers into the ash on the floor and wrote one word. "One." The fire bent over it. One dragon. One note. One name. Not all at once. Vespera laughed, but the sound was tight. "A sweet idea. Too slow to survive. The listeners already have the other notes. I can pull them before she learns the first name." She raised the rod. Caeryn stepped between Vespera and the braziers. The fire hissed at him. Not in welcome. In warning. Vespera smiled. "Careful, Majesty. If you stand in the path of Queen Song without command, right, the fire will judge you as interference." Caeryn did not move. "Then I give up command." Right over the first flame. The court fire dimmed. Elowen looked up sharply. He placed his burned hand over the cracked brazier, above the white gold name sign. His blood dripped onto the bronze, and the flame swallowed it without bowing. Vespera's face went pale with fury. "You cannot surrender royal fire piece by piece. The fire court is built on unified command." "The fire court is built on buried throats," Caeryn said. The brazier answered with a low, approving hum. Blood ran down his wrist. The flame crawled over his palm, not to heal him, but to remove something. A thread of gold lifted from his skin and burned away. The first royal claim over Velrath's song. Caeryn's knees almost bent. They did not. Elowen watched him endure it. That did not forgive him, but it made his guilt useful. Vespera's expression hardened into calculation. She turned the rod toward the other braziers. "If he releases one, I claim the 11 under court safety. Any dragon still hooked remains under Singer custody until the ash-maid proves she can return notes without killing herself." The remaining braziers snapped shut around their flames. A bronze cage of sound formed above each one. Elowen felt the 11 notes trapped inside those cages, crying against her scar. Velrath's gold eye fixed on her. The dragon did not ask to be freed first. It waited for her to choose correctly. Elowen knelt beside the cracked brazier. The single note in the flame trembled. She did not try to pull it back. Instead, she pressed her ash-covered fingers to the name sign and looked down through the split floor at Velrath's throat. The dragon understood. It lowered its head as far as the hooks allowed. Elowen pointed to the first hook. "Show." The cracked brazier poured its white gold light downward. The hook closest to Velrath's jaw opened like a tiny bronze mouth. Inside it, Elowen saw a memory. Child Elowen lying fevered beneath the kitchen table. Her small hand outstretched toward a coal that would not burn hot enough to keep her warm. Velrath's great eye watched her through a crack in the floor no child should have seen. The dragon had hummed one note. She had hummed it back. Not stealing. Listening. The coal had brightened. Queen Maelira's voice came from the brazier, soft and broken by death. Ash. Listeners hear without taking. That is why the command chose her. Elowen's breath shook. Not singer. Not vessel. Listener. Vespera struck the rod again, but the first earmark on its handle cracked. The first listener hook in Velrath's throat broke. It fell upward through the glass floor instead of down, landing at Elowen's knees with a bright bronze ring. The court's hidden ears screamed as if one of them had been torn from the wall. Elowen reached for the broken hook. Caeryn caught himself before stopping her. Good. She picked it up. It was warm. Too warm. Inside the curved bronze, the stolen note echoed once more in her childhood voice. Then it whispered one forbidden name. Vespera. The broken hook whispered Vespera's name in Elowen's childhood voice. Not as an accusation. As a memory. The sound slipped out of the bronze curve and curled around Elowen's burned fingers. Her scar tightened, but the note did not try to enter her throat. It stayed in her hand, small and obedient, waiting for her to decide where truth should go. Vespera's face did not change quickly enough to look innocent. Caeryn saw it. So did the first brazier. The cracked flame leaned toward Vespera, white gold light sharpening across the bronze rod in her hand. One earmark on the handle had split open. From inside the crack came a faint sound. Not Elowen's voice this time, but Vespera's younger one. Thin and breathless. Again, it whispered. Elowen closed her burned hand around the hook. Show. The first brazier obeyed. Fire spilled across the black glass floor and formed a memory at Vespera's feet. A younger Vespera stood in the lower music chamber, not yet wrapped in silk, not yet celebrated by the court. She was thin, hungry-eyed, dressed in a singer's training robe too plain for her ambition. Before her stood a bronze practice flame. It did not move when she sang. She tried again. The flame did not bend. Her voice was beautiful. The fire did not care. A teacher's hand struck the table. Pretty sound is not flame song. Young Vespera's face went white. The memory shifted. She stood outside the queen's chambers, listening through a bronze vent while Queen Maelira sang to an unseen child. The fire in every lamp leaned toward the queen's voice. Vespera's eyes filled with something worse than envy. Recognition. She had heard the difference between beauty and power, and she had wanted the second. The memory snapped as Vespera struck the rod against the floor. Old humiliation is not evidence. Elowen looked at her, then at the hook in her palm. The note inside it pulsed once. Evidence. The flame understood. Another memory opened, sharper. Young Vespera knelt before the bronze listeners. Tears on her face. Hands clasped around the same rod before it had been fully carved. Behind the bronze screens, masked court figures watched without faces. I can serve the song, Vespera said. A listener's voice answered from the dark. You cannot carry queen fire. I can keep it from the wrong throat. The masked figures went still. Vespera lifted her head. Give me the ears. Give me the hooks. I will make the court safe from any voice that outranks it. Caeryn's mouth tightened. Vespera had not merely been used. She had offered herself as the knife. Elowen's fingers shook around the hook. Anger rose in her, not loud, not wild, but clean enough to frighten her. Vespera had once been dismissed, measured, found lacking. Instead of breaking the system that starved her, she had fed it with children, dragons, and stolen notes. Vespera's eyes fixed on Elowen. Do not pity me. Elowen did not. She lifted the hook and pointed it toward the 11 sealed braziers. Vespera smiled coldly. You want more? Good. She raised the rod. The sealed braziers rang. 11 bronze cages tightened around 11 flames. Beneath the floor, Velrath's remaining hooks glowed in answer, and the buried dragon gave a low, strangled hum. Other dragons shifted under the ash, not waking, but suffering because the sound cages were being pulled through their throats. If she breaks another hook, Vespera declared, the next note will seek the nearest open wound. Her eyes moved to Caeryn's burned palm. Royal blood is open enough. Caeryn did not step back. Elowen did. Not from fear. From choice. She raised one hand toward him. Stay. His jaw clenched, but he stayed. Vespera's smile sharpened. How touching. The maid protects the king who placed her in the circle. Elowen looked at Caeryn long enough for the wound to land. Then she turned away. She would not let Vespera make him the center of her cost. Elowen knelt and pressed the broken hook into the ash. With 2 burned fingers, she drew a circle around it. Then she pointed to herself, then to Velrath, then to the first brazier. The queen's flame translated. 1 listener, 1 dragon, 1 note. Vespera laughed. You think order will save you? Elowen slowly closed her fist. No, not save. Prevent theft. The first brazier rose higher. Queen Meleira's voice trembled through the flame. A song taken by force becomes command. A song answered by choice becomes witness. The black glass floor warmed beneath Elowen's knees. The broken hook opened. Inside it, the child note brightened and reached. Not for Elowen's throat, not for Caeryn's blood, but for Velrath's first wound. The note slid through the cracked floor and touched the torn place where the hook had been. Velrath inhaled. For the first time, the dragon breathed without bronze inside that part of its throat. The fire court shook. Not from danger. From a dragon remembering pain without obeying it. Vespera's expression flickered. Elowen saw it. The first freed note had not made Velrath hers. It had made the lie weaker. Caeryn stepped closer to the first brazier, careful not to cross between Elowen and the flame. What must I surrender for the next hook? Vespera turned sharply. Nothing. The king has paid enough. Elowen looked at her. There. Fear again. Caeryn heard it too. What does the second hook hold? Vespera's hand tightened around the rod. The queen's flame bent toward the sealed brazier beside the first. Inside its bronze cage, a second note fluttered like a trapped bird. Elowen pointed to the floor. Show. The second brazier resisted. Vespera smiled with relief. It will not answer her. The second hook was not placed by me. Caeryn's eyes narrowed. Elowen looked from the brazier to his burned hand, then to the obsidian throne at the end of the hall. The second brazier flared black. A memory formed, not at Vespera's feet, but beneath Caeryn's throne. Queen Meleira lay dying, 1 hand pressed to her throat, while a man in royal black stood over her with a ring shaped like a dragon's open mouth. Not Tserin, Alder, Crueler, the court's late regent, Caeryn's uncle. The man in the memory lowered the ring toward the queen's lips and said, If the command cannot serve the throne, it will serve no one. Caeryn went still. The second hook in Velrath's throat split open, and from inside it, Elowen's childhood voice whispered the regent's name. The second hook whispered the regent's name from inside Elowen's lost childhood voice. Orvane Veyr. Caeryn did not move at first. The name struck him differently than Vespera's had. Vespera was a blade he could hate. Orvane was blood. The late regent had raised him after Queen Meleira died. Placed the crown in his hands. Taught him which nobles to distrust, which borders to fear, which flames to command before they could turn wild. Now the second hook had opened beneath the throne and named him as part of the theft. Elowen watched Caeryn's face go still. Not empty. Worse. Carefully held together. Vespera recovered before he did. The dead cannot answer accusations. The second brazier burned black. Queen Meleira's dying memory trembled beneath the obsidian throne. Elowen Vale stood over her with the dragon mouth ring lowered toward her lips. Bronze ears opened in the walls around him. He was not panicked. He was not grieving. He looked like a man sealing a door before smoke could escape. If the command cannot serve the throne, the memory repeated, it will serve no one. The ring drank the queen's final breath. Velrath, chained in the vision, tried to rise. The second hook drove into the dragon's throat, pinning its roar into silence. Young Caeryn, hidden beyond the pillar, screamed without sound as Vespera's rod split the command into another flame. Elowen's chest tightened. Caeryn had seen more than he remembered, or someone had made sure memory closed around the worst of it. She lifted the broken first hook in one hand and pointed with the other toward the throne. Show what he made the king forget. The flames bent low. Caeryn's head turned toward her. For a heartbeat, something like fear crossed his eyes. Not fear of truth. Fear that truth would explain him too well. The black glass beneath the throne opened. A memory rose, smaller and colder than the first. A boy Caeryn kneeling before Orvane in the empty fire hall after the funeral. His hands were folded in his lap, His eyes were swollen from crying. Orvain stood behind him with one hand on his shoulder and the dragon mouth ring on the other. "You heard nothing," Orvain said. The boy whispered, "I heard Mother sing." "No." The ring glowed. "You heard grief." "I heard Velrath fall." "You heard war ending." The ring touched the boy's temple. Gold fire sank into his skin. The child Caeryn went rigid. Elowen looked away for one breath, then forced herself to look back. Pity was not forgiveness. But truth demanded eyes. The memory faded. Caeryn's burned hand shook at his side. Vespra's voice turned smooth. "Your uncle protected you from a command too dangerous for a child king." Caeryn looked at her. "He stole my memory. He preserved your rule. He chained my mother's dragon. He prevented your mother's last command from waking a buried army." Elowen struck the black glass floor with the broken hook. The sound cracked through the argument. "No." The first brazier flared beside her, translating the silence into fire. The queen's voice rose. Faint, but sharp. The command was not wake. The flames shivered. It was choose. Vespra's lips pressed together. Elowen pointed to the second hook still lodged in Velrath's throat, then to Caeryn. "Cost." He understood. His jaw tightened. "What must I surrender?" The second brazier answered before Vespra could speak. "Memory." The word appeared in gold ash across the floor. Caeryn went pale. Elowen's fingers tightened around the hook. No. She did not want his pain to become the key to every door. That path was too easy for guilty kings. Bleed, suffer, be admired. The wound became theater, and the woman harmed became audience. She pointed to herself, then shook her head. "Not for me." Then she pointed to Velrath. "For him." The queen's flame brightened. Caeryn looked down through the cracked floor at his mother's war dragon. Velrath's gold eye watched him with an old patience that made kings seem young. Caeryn took a slow breath. "He kept my memory so the throne could claim innocence." The second brazier hummed. "I return that innocence." Vespra stepped forward sharply. "Majesty, do not. If you release royal innocence, every order given under Orvain's regency becomes reviewable." Caeryn did not look at her. "Good. The fire court will fracture. It should have fractured when my mother's last breath was stolen." He drew the small blade again, but Elowen caught his wrist. The touch burned her palm. He stopped instantly. She shook her head and pointed to his temple. "Not blood. Memory." Caeryn closed his eyes. Then he pressed 2 fingers to the old place where Orvain's ring had touched him. "I remember," he said. The second brazier erupted. Not in heat, in sound. A child's scream rang through the fire court, and every bronze ear above them recoiled. Caeryn staggered but stayed standing. The scream tore out of the throne, out of the floor, out of the lie that had wrapped his childhood. Velrath's second hook cracked. The dragon breathed deeper. Elowen felt the released note brush against her scar. It tried to return, but she caught it in her burned hand and placed it into the second brazier. Not her throat. The flame wrote a second name sign. Velrath. Then another. Mylira. The dragon's throat opened wider, but the remaining 10 hooks tightened. Vespra lifted her rod with both hands now. "Enough. If you free the queen's dragon by memory, I invoke Regency law." Bronze script rose from the floor around Caeryn. "Orders given under Regency seal remain valid until King publicly condemns the regent who crowned him." The court fire bent toward Caeryn. Elowen froze. There was the blade. If Caeryn condemned Orvain, he undermined his own coronation. If he refused, the hooks stayed. Vespra smiled. "Will you unmake the throne to ease a dragon's throat?" Caeryn looked at Elowen. She expected command. She expected apology. Instead, he asked, "Do you want the second hook broken?" Elowen looked down at Velrath. The dragon had not asked to be free first. It had kept her voice alive through years of bronze pain. She nodded. Caeryn turned to the court. "My uncle crowned me with stolen memory," he said. "I condemn Elowen Vale before fire, dragon, and throne." The obsidian throne cracked from arm to base. Caeryn fell to one knee. The second hook shattered. Velrath lifted its chained head and sang the next note in Elowen's childhood voice. But the note did not say Orvain again. It whispered a title hidden beneath the regent's name. First listener. The title hidden beneath Orvain's name did not fade. First listener. It burned across the cracked throne in letters made of black smoke and queen fire, then sank into the obsidian like a confession the stone had been forced to hold for years. Caeryn remained on one knee before it, one hand braced against the glass floor, the other still blackened from chain fire and royal blood. He looked at the title as if it had reached backward through his entire life and rearranged every lesson his uncle had ever given him. First listener. Not regent. Not guardian. Not only the man who crowned him, the man who had taught the fire court how to hear without being seen. Vespera's face turned cold. A title proves nothing without the listener register. The bronze ears above the hall stirred. Elowen felt them before they moved. They were no longer only mouths in the ceiling. They were nerves. Hidden pieces of an old system waking because their master's title had been named. Caeryn tried to rise. Bronze script snapped around his kneeling body. Regency condemnation incomplete. The words coiled from the cracked throne to his shoulders and pressed him down. His jaw tightened. But he did not fight it blindly this time. Good. The court had been built to punish force. If he tore through it, Vespera would turn the broken law against Velrath, against Elowen, against every dragon still chained beneath the floor. Vespera lifted her rod. If the king condemns the regent, he must also condemn every order issued through the regent's listener seal, every border treaty, every fire tax, every dragon burial, every servant designation. Her eyes slid to Elowen, including the ash-maid's lawful placement beneath court protection. Protection. Elowen almost laughed. But her throat had no sound to shape the cruelty. Court protection meant kitchens with no windows. It meant ash water eating her hands raw. It meant no one asking why a child with a lost voice woke screaming whenever bronze bells rang. She lifted one burned hand and touched the scar at her throat. The third brazier flared. Below the floor, the third hook in Velrath's throat glowed bright orange. The dragon's gold eye moved to her, patient and warning. Elowen understood. The third hook did not hold Caeryn's memory. It held hers. Vespera saw the realization and smiled. Careful. Some silences exist because the mind is merciful. Elowen looked at her. No. Some silences existed because thieves needed the witness alive but unreadable. She knelt beside the third brazier and pressed her palm to the black glass. With ash and blood from her burned skin, she drew a small, closed circle. Do not pull. Then she opened the circle with one line. Show only what I choose. The third flame bent low, Caeryn's gaze fixed on her hand. Elowen. She did not look at him. If she did, his fear might become another weight she had to carry. The queen's fire entered the third hook. A memory opened, but not fully. It came in pieces, obedient to the line Elowen had drawn. A servant corridor filled with smoke. Small Elowen hiding beneath a table. Queen Melira kneeling in front of her, not crowned, not distant, but fever-pale and desperate, one hand over Elowen's mouth. The queen whispered, Listen, little Ash. Child Elowen had nodded, eyes wide with terror. Do not sing it back, Melira said. Hear it. Hold it. Let no one own it through your throat. The memory trembled. Vespera's rod struck the floor. The bronze ears screamed and tried to open the rest by force. Pain ripped across Elowen's scar. The first 2 notes in the braziers shuddered, as if the remaining 10 were clawing toward them. Velrath's throat tightened around its hooks. Caeryn strained against the Regency script. Stop. Elowen slammed her fist against the glass. The sound was small. The flames obeyed it anyway. Silence dropped over the court. Not absence. Commanded silence. Every brazier lowered its flame. Every bronze ear froze half open. Even Vespera's rod went dull for one breath. Elowen had not sung. She had made the hall listen to nothing. In that nothing, the memory continued by her choice. Queen Melira took a single ember from her own dying flame and pressed it beneath child Elowen's collarbone. An ash listener hears without stealing, she whispered. That is why they will never believe you matter. Child Elowen shook her head, crying silently. The queen smiled through blood. Good. Let them be wrong. The memory broke. The third hook in Velrath's throat cracked, but did not shatter. Vespera exhaled with relief. Not enough. Elowen looked down at her ash circle. The open line had burned away. The hook needed one more thing. Nama. Not hers. Not the queen's. The listener who placed it. Elowen turned toward Vespera's rod and pointed. Vespera's smile vanished. Caeryn lifted his head. The third hook was yours. Vespera's fingers tightened around the rod. I was ordered. Elowen slowly shook her head. The third brazier flared with white gold fire. A final shard of memory appeared. Young Vespera stood over child Elowen after the queen vanished into smoke. Orvain's voice came from behind a bronze screen. Seal the listener. Young Vespera lifted the rod. Then she hesitated. For one heartbeat, she looked at the little girl beneath the table and saw a child. Only one heartbeat. Then ambition returned. If I seal her, Vespera said. The court names me first singer. Orvain's voice answered. Seal her well, and the court will need no queen song again. Vespera touched the third hook to Elowen's throat. Child Elowen's silent scream filled the flame. The third hook shattered. Velrath roared for the first time. Not fully, not freely, but enough to shake every hidden ear in the ceiling until bronze dust rained down over the fire court. Elowen caught the third note before it could enter her throat. It burned brighter than the first two, wild with childhood terror. She pressed it into the third brazier. The flame wrote one sentence across the glass. Ash listener recognized. Vespera's rod split down the center. Then the hidden ears above the throne opened all at once, and Elowen Vale's dead voice poured through them. Then let the ash listener hear what the queen begged me to bury. Elowen Vale's dead voice poured from the hidden ears above the throne, and called Elowen by a name she had never been given. Ash throat. The word struck the fire court like a brand pressed to bone. Elowen did not know the title, but her scar did. It tightened once, then opened with a heat so clean it almost felt cold. The three return notes burned in the first three braziers, each one trembling toward her. Each one held away from her throat by her own choice. Below the broken glass floor, Velrath lifted its chained head higher. 3 hooks had shattered from its throat. 9 remained, glowing bronze and cruel. Around the old war dragon, buried shapes stirred under ash. A young dragon with folded wings, a pale hatchling curled in sleep, a scarred fire drake whose throat was wrapped in wire. None roared, none obeyed. They listened. Vespera's broken rod sparked in her hands. Do not answer him. Dead listeners speak in traps. Elowen looked at her. For once, Vespera was telling the truth. That did not make her safe. Orvain's voice rolled through every bronze ear. Queen Melira hid more than a command in the Ash Girl. She hid a refusal. Caeryn's head lifted. The regency script still bound him to one knee before the cracked throne. His face was pale, sweat damp at his temples, but his eyes sharpened at the word. Refusal. Elowen lowered one hand to the glass and drew a line in ash. Only what the queen chose. The first 3 braziers flared. The hidden ears screamed in protest. Elowen pressed her burned palm harder to the floor. Silence. The court went mute around her, not empty, not dead, but held. The bronze ears remained open, yet no sound moved through them unless the queen's fire allowed it. Vespera's lips parted in shock. Caeryn stared at Elowen, as if watching a door open where he had only seen a wall. Orvain's voice thinned. You cannot silence the first listener. Elowen drew another mark. Watch me. The third brazier translated with a sharp white flame. Velrath's gold eye brightened. A memory opened beneath the throne. Queen Melira stood in a chamber of red stone below the fire court. One hand against her swollen belly, the other on Velrath's snout. Around them slept dragons beneath glass, not imprisoned yet, but hidden. War dragons, hearth dragons, hatchlings too young to understand fear. Their breathing warmed the chamber like a second heart under the kingdom. Melira was crying. Not from terror, from decision. Orvain stood before her with the dragon mouth ring. If you give the command, they will wake for you. The court will kneel. Your son will inherit a kingdom that cannot be challenged. The queen's face turned hard. No. The single word shook every sleeping dragon below. Elowen felt it in her bones. Orvain's younger face twisted. You would leave them buried? I would leave them unowned. The memory trembled. Caeryn shut his eyes. That cost him. Elowen saw it. His mother had not been trying to raise an army for him. She had been refusing to give him one. Maelira touched Velrath's throat. If I die, no crown may wake them by grief. No singer may wake them by hunger. No king may wake them by blood. Orvain stepped closer. Then why hide the command in a child? The queen looked toward the doorway. Small Elowen stood there in the memory, barefoot, soot on her cheeks, holding a coal pan too heavy for her thin arms. She had wandered in because the dragons had been humming, because she had heard without being invited. Maelira's expression changed. Wonder, because she heard them without wanting anything. The words pierced Elowen more deeply than any hook. All her life the court had called her empty because she did not sound. The queen had chosen her because she listened without taking. Orvain's dead voice hissed through the ears. And that is why she must be opened. The refusal is useless, unless completed. Make her sing, and the dragons become answerable. Vespera's eyes flashed with sudden understanding. Elowen saw the next strike before it came. Vespera lifted the splintered rod and pointed not at Elowen but at Caeryn. Regency completion law. If the queen's refusal remains unfinished, her heir may complete it by royal suffering. The regency script around Caeryn burned gold. His body locked. Elowen turned sharply. No. The 9 hooks in Velrath's throat brightened, all pulling toward Caeryn's blood. Vespera had found another path. If she could not force Elowen to sing, she would make Caeryn's pain complete the wrong command. Caeryn clenched his teeth as the throne dragged his wounded hand toward the nearest brazier. Elowen, he forced out. Tell me what to do. Not command. Not rescue. Ask. She pointed to his crown hand, then to the throne, then slowly closed her fist. Do not feed it. His face tightened with agony. It is pulling through the regency seal. Elowen looked at the cracked throne, then at the buried dragons, then at the braziers. The 4th hook was not in Velrath alone. It was tied to the throne's right to complete unfinished royal songs through an heir's pain. If she broke it wrong, Caeryn might lose the right to rule. If she left it, Vespera and Orvain's listeners could use him as a living throat. Elowen stood. Her knees shook, but she stood. She crossed to the throne without singing a note. Vespera laughed. You cannot break regency law with silence. Elowen picked up ash from the floor and pressed it against Caeryn's burned hand. Then she placed his hand flat against the black glass, away from the brazier. Caeryn understood. He opened his palm willingly. Blood touched ash. Ash touched glass. The 4th brazier ignited white. Caeryn spoke, voice broken but clear. I surrender the throne's right to finish my mother's song through my pain. The fire court shuddered. The obsidian throne cracked deeper, and the regency script snapped away from his body. Caeryn fell forward, catching himself with one hand, but he did not reach for Elowen. The 4th hook in Velrath's throat shattered. Elowen caught the note in both hands. It was heavier than the others. It carried the queen's refusal. For one breath, Elowen almost let it into her throat. Velrath growled softly. Warning. She turned and placed the 4th note into the 4th brazier. The flame did not sing. It spoke. Do not wake them to serve. The buried dragons answered with one low hum. Orvain's dead voice screamed from the bronze ears. Vespera staggered back as her rod split further. Then the 4th broken hook spun across the glass and stopped at Elowen's feet. Inside its bronze curve, a new memory flickered. Not Maelira, not Orvain, not Vespera. A man with Caeryn's eyes stood over a sleeping hatchling and whispered, If the queen refuses, bind the unborn song instead. Caeryn went still. The flame named him before anyone else could. Your father. The portrait above the throne cracked before Caeryn could breathe. King Veyr's painted eyes split first, a bright line of fire cutting through the gold until the dead king's gaze looked wounded and awake. The 4th brazier did not repeat the name. It had already named him. Now it made the fire court suffer the consequence of hearing it. Below the black glass, Velrath's gold eye closed once, slow and grieving, as if this was the memory it had hoped would remain buried longest. Caeryn did not speak. Elowen watched his face carefully. Grief could become denial. Denial could become command. Command could become another hook. But he only looked at the fourth broken hook lying at her feet. "Show it," he said. Vespera turned sharply. "Majesty." Caeryn's voice cut colder. No title can protect him from flame. The fourth brazier flared. A memory opened above the cracked floor. King Auril stood in the hidden dragon chamber years before Caeryn wore a crown. He was younger than his portraits. Broader, golden-eyed, armored in black scale. Queen Melira lay unconscious on a stone couch behind him, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Around the chamber, sleeping dragons stirred under glass, as if they heard something no human ear could bear. Orvain stood beside Auril with the dragon mouth ring. Vespera stood farther back, younger, pale, holding the bronze rod with both hands. A tiny sound came from Melira's body, not from her throat, from the child she carried. Caeryn's unborn song. Elowen's stomach turned. Auril looked toward Melira's belly with an expression that was not hatred. That made it worse. It was fear dressed as duty. "If the queen refuses to wake them," Auril said, "the heir must carry what she denies." Orvain bowed his head. "The unborn song can be bound before it becomes will," Vespera whispered. "If we bind it, the prince may never command dragons freely." Auril's jaw tightened. "A prince who can choose against the throne is a danger to the throne." Caeryn flinched as if the words had struck his body. Elowen wanted to reach for him. She did not. Not yet. The memory showed Orvain lowering the ring toward Melira's belly. Bronze ears opened in the chamber walls. The sleeping dragons stirred harder, and Velrath, not yet hooked, tried to rise. Auril placed one hand on Velrath's snout. "Forgive me," he said. Velrath's eye burned gold. "No." The word came not as sound, but as flame. Auril still gave the order. The dragon mouth ring drank the unborn note. Caeryn dropped to one knee in the real hall. One hand pressed over his chest. The place beneath his ribs glowed black gold. Not like a wound made tonight, but like one that had been sleeping since before birth. Elowen understood then. Caeryn had not only been trained to command, he had been wounded into it. That did not clean his hands, but it changed the shape of the cage. Vespera seized the silence. "You see? The king himself is bound to the buried dragons. If the ash-maid continues, she unthreads his birth. Right. Without that binding, he may lose dragon command entirely." Caeryn looked up at Elowen. His face was pale with pain. "Then let it be lost," he said. "Too fast." Elowen shook her head sharply. He stilled. "Good." She dragged ash across the black glass in 3 short marks. Dragon, city, breath. Then she crossed out the crown mark beside them. Not collapse. Not surrender for the sake of guilt. Measure. Caeryn's mouth tightened. He understood the rebuke. A king could not burn down what people still needed, simply because guilt made ruin feel honest. Vespera smiled faintly. "Even she knows your surrender can destroy more than it saves." Elowen turned toward her. Then she pointed to the 5th brazier. Vespera's smile vanished. The 5th hook in Velrath's throat glowed. Not with queen fire. With unborn fire. Caeryn's fire. Elowen felt it pull toward him, not toward her. If she broke that hook wrong, the note might return to Caeryn all at once and burn through the command wound under his ribs. If she left it, the buried dragons remained tied to a king who had never been allowed to choose whether he wanted to command them. She knelt before the 5th brazier and pressed both palms to the glass. The first 4 notes burned around her, waiting. She drew in ash. Not return. Then beneath it, remember. The 5th brazier answered slowly. A vision opened. Not of Auril giving the order, but of the moment after. Queen Melira awoke. She touched her belly and knew something had been taken. She did not scream. She sang without sound. The flame in the chamber bent to her mouth, caught the shape of her grief, and hid one spark of the stolen unborn song where no king would search. In the ash, in the throat of a servant child who had listened without wanting. Child Elowen, feverish under the kitchen table, opened her eyes as a black gold spark settled beneath her collarbone beside the queen's unfinished command. Caeryn stared at the memory. "You carried part of me," he whispered. Elowen's scar burned. She looked at him sharply. No. The first brazier snapped in agreement. No claim. No romance made from theft. No softening the truth because it sounded intimate. Caeryn swallowed the rest of whatever he had almost said. Not mine, he corrected, voice rough. A stolen choice, hidden near yours. Elowen held his gaze. Better. Not enough. But better. Vespera struck the rod against the floor. If she carries the king's unborn song, she is royal fire property. The bronze ears opened wide. The old law tried to form in the ceiling smoke. Elowen stood before it could descend. She lifted her burned hand and pressed it over her scar. Not to protect it, but to claim the silence around it. The 4 braziers sang together. Ash does not own what it shelters. The smoke law cracked. Elowen pointed to Caeryn. He understood. His face tightened with dread. But he stepped to the 5th brazier and placed his hand above it. I release royal claim over the unborn song hidden in ash, he said. The 5th hook split. Pain struck him so hard he nearly fell forward into the flame. Elowen caught his wrist on instinct. The contact burned them both. For one breath, the first 4 notes flared between their skin queen's refusal. Childhood voice, dragon grief, unborn choice. Caeryn did not hold her. He let her release him. The 5th hook shattered. Velrath lifted its head higher. 5 wounds free, 7 hooks left. The 5th note rose from the broken bronze. It did not enter Caeryn. It did not enter Elowen. It flew into the 5th brazier and became a small black gold flame shaped like a sleeping dragon egg. Then Orvain's dead voice laughed from every bronze ear. Too late. The 7 remaining hooks in Velrath's throat turned inward. Beneath the fire court, every buried dragon opened one eye. Vespera's broken rod rose by itself and pointed at Elowen's scar. The first listener spoke through the ceiling. If the ash throat will not sing, make the dragon sing through her. The 7 remaining hooks tore inward at the same time. Velrath's throat arched beneath the black glass, and the buried dragons around him opened their mouths without choosing to. No roar came out. No flame. Only a terrible gathering of sound, dragged upward through bronze, ash, and old royal law toward the scar in Elowen's throat. Her body locked. The first 5 notes blazed in their braziers, but the 7 stolen ones rushed past them like starving things. Vespera's broken rod hovered in the air, no longer held by her hand. Orvain's dead will moved through it. Through the bronze ears. Through every hidden listener mouth in the hall. Elowen clamped both hands over her throat. No. The word did not sound. The flames heard it anyway. They bent toward her. But the 7 hooks pulled harder. One note struck her scar. Pain opened white behind her eyes. Another followed. Her knees hit the black glass. Beneath her palms, the floor shook with dragons being forced to sing through a human wound. Caeryn surged forward. The braziers turned on him. Not to stop him gently. To burn him if he made himself the answer. He stopped, breathing hard. Blood and ash streaking his face. That cost him more than movement. Elowen saw it even through pain. He wanted to tear the rod from the air, shatter the ceiling, break every bronze ear with his hands. But force was the old language, and the old language had built the hooks. Vespera staggered beneath the floating rod, her face pale with fear she could no longer disguise. I am not doing this. Elowen believed her. That made it worse. Orvain had turned even Vespera into a surviving instrument. Dangerous, guilty, ambitious, but still something the first listener could use. The rod pointed at Elowen's scar again. The 7 notes pressed closer, Velrath's gold eye fixed on her from below. Around him, a hatchling trembled, its small hooked throat glowing. A scarred firedrake's mouth opened in silent agony. Royal dragons, war dragons, hearth dragons, not an army waiting for a crown. A buried choir being strangled into obedience. Elowen lowered one shaking hand from her throat. Caeryn's voice came rough. Tell me. She looked at him. Not for permission. For cost. Then she pointed to the throne. The ceiling ears. The braziers. And finally, to the floor beneath the dragons. Her fingers drew one word in ash. Listen. Caeryn stared at it. Then he understood. Not command. Not surrender. not blood this time. Listening. The thing kings had never paid. He turned from Elowen to the fire court, then removed the dragon ring from his hand. The royal command ring. The last unbroken symbol of a Veyr king's right to order dragonfire. Vespera whispered. If you give that up, no dragon is bound to answer your blood. Caeryn looked down at Velrath. Then my blood will have to become worthy of being answered. He set the ring on the black glass and crushed it beneath his heel. The fire court went dark. For one breath, every flame vanished. In that darkness, the 7 notes lost their path. Elowen acted. She slammed both palms onto the glass and opened her mouth not to sing, but to breathe out silence. The silence moved. It poured from her scar like ash wind, soft and absolute, filling the hall before the stolen notes could enter her. The bronze ears above the court froze open. Orvain's voice broke into fragments. The hooks in Velrath's throat trembled, suddenly unable to tell whether they were meant to pull sound or receive it. Elowen pointed to the first remaining hook. Then the next. Then the next. Onebiwan. Namis. The queen's fire returned in the first 5 braziers, small but steady. Caeryn knelt beside the crushed ring and did not reach for it. Vespera watched him with something like horror, as if seeing a throne refuse its own hunger for the first time. The 6th hook opened. Inside it, Elowen heard a hatchling's first chirp, stolen before it could choose a mother flame. She drew the hatchling's shape in ash. The hook broke. The 7th held a hearth dragon's hum, once used to warm the lower city before court singers trapped it for noble feasts. Elowen placed that note into the 7th brazier. The 8th carried a war dragon's refusal to burn an innocent harbor. It broke when Caeryn said aloud, "No king had the right to punish mercy." The 9th held Vespera's first willing lie. She flinched as the memory opened. Young Vespera accepting the rod, knowing the listeners would one day need a child's silence. Her face collapsed under the truth, but Elowen raised a hand before Caeryn could move. No sword. Vespera had to be named, not erased. The 9th hook broke. The 10th, 11th, and 12th hooks shattered together when the buried dragons answered by name, not command. Velrath, Sorin, Aishel, Mirith, little Dragonfire the hatchling. Others, rough and ancient, each name rising from ash like a coal refusing to die. The floating rod split. Orvain's dead voice screamed once through every bronze ear. Then the ears melted shut. Not from heat, from being made useless. The final stolen note hovered before Elowen's mouth. Her childhood voice, whole enough now to wound her if she took it too quickly. Velrath lifted his freed head. She may choose. The dragon sang. The hall waited. Elowen looked at the note. All her life, she had wanted one sound. One simple word. Water. Stop. No. Her own name spoken from her own throat. But wanting was not the same as being ready. She held out her hand. The note settled into her palm. Not her throat. Not yet. Her first sound would not be stolen back by pain, pity, or court demand. The braziers accepted the choice. Vespera fell to her knees as the last pieces of borrowed flamesong peeled from her voice. She was not voiceless. That would have been too neat. She still had a voice, beautiful and human, but the fire no longer bent to it. Elowen pointed to the melted bronze rod, then to Vespera. Queen Maelira's flame spoke for her, named as singer of stolen notes. Bound from flame until every voice divided by her rod is witnessed. Caeryn turned to the throne. It was cracked, dark, and no longer crowned by obedient fire. He looked at Elowen. What does the ash throat require of the king? She stepped to the black glass, ash on her hands, one childhood note glowing in her palm. Slowly she wrote, "Do not make silence prove pain again." Caeryn read it. Then he bowed his head not as a lover claiming grace, not as a king granting honor, but as the man who had made her suffering public and would spend his reign answering for it. "It becomes law," he said. Velrath rose beneath the broken floor, free but not raging. The buried dragons lifted their heads around him, not awake for war, not summoned to serve, awake to choose. Elowen stood before them with no song in her throat and one living note in her hand. She was not the fire court singer. She was not the Dragon King's redemption. She was the silence that had listened when crowns, courts, and listeners only wanted to take. And when dawn touched the bronze braziers, Elowen finally opened her mouth. Only one sound came out. Her own name,